an Arab hacker with Iraqi roots, got into the world of the internet and programming when he was just 8 years old. He mastered hacking and became a pro during his teenage years. He formed a team called LulzSec, which became one of the most famous hacking groups in 2011. His crew was so skilled that they managed to target and hack governments and big corporations. They even broke into tech security companies directly linked to the FBI. Eventually, they were bold enough to hack the U.S. intelligence services, which put them in direct confrontation with the FBI and CIA. Even though their identities were unknown and their moves were calculated, the FBI resorted to some dirty, sneaky tactics to take them down. You won't believe just how cunning they were. If you want to know what they did and what happened next, stick around for the whole story. Hey, I'm Fernando, and today's story is about a hacker named Mustafa al-Bassam. He's 29 years old now, but he entered the world of hacking when he was just 8. Yeah, 8 years old. Mustafa is originally from Iraq. He was born in Baghdad in 1995, but in the year 2000, when he turned 5, his family migrated to the UK, specifically London. Mustafa grew up and lived there, and his family also got British citizenship. Mustafa's journey into computers started when he was just 7 years old. His dad bought him a laptop, and that's when Mustafa started exploring the internet and games. Now this was back in 2003, and the internet was still in its early days, so it was like discovering a new world. From the get-go, Mustafa was fascinated. He'd jump into online games or browse websites, and it all seemed like a whole new reality he could explore. Even though he was only around 7 or 8, his curiosity led him to start learning about programming. He wanted to know how these games were made and how websites were designed and coded. Bit by bit, he started improving his skills. He even learned some programming languages and used tools like Microsoft Front Page to design his own websites. Mustafa was hooked, completely absorbed in this world. But up to this point, he hadn't gotten into anything related to hacking yet. His first step into hacking actually came because of a school assignment, specifically a math homework. While Mustafa was working on it, he needed a calculator, but instead of going to get a physical calculator, he just Googled for an online one. He found a site with an online calculator, but as he was using it, he noticed something odd. If he entered certain code into the calculator, he could hack the site, get its data, and dive deeper into its system. Basically, the calculator had a flaw, a vulnerability that Mustafa could exploit to hack the site entirely. This was his first hack ever, and he was just 8 years old. From that moment, something clicked in his brain. It was like someone had flipped a switch, and a light bulb turned on. He realized he had a power that only a handful of people had, the power to hack. Mustafa knew right then that this would be his path in life. Soon after, Mustafa started testing his skills in the real world. He decided to try and hack into the computers and servers at his school. The school's servers didn't have much security, according to Mustafa himself, so he hacked a school server and got access to teachers' data, their salaries, student exam scores, and other confidential stuff. Now, while Mustafa was smart, he was still just an 8-year-old kid, so he wasn't careful, and he ended up bragging to some of his classmates about how he hacked the school's server and saw info that no one else was supposed to see. Word spread, and eventually, the school administration found out. They called Mustafa into the principal's office, and they kind of held an investigation. Mustafa admitted to what he'd done. He told them he hacked the school's servers and accessed private data. The principal and the staff didn't know what to do exactly. Should they be impressed or mad? In the end, they gave him a disciplinary lesson, told him what he did was wrong, and informed his dad about the whole thing. That was that, and the situation blew over. But of course, Mustafa wasn't about to stop there. For him, hacking was like a superpower, and when a kid that young gets such a power, he's definitely not going to stop. If anything, he's even more excited to use it and see how far he can go. And that's exactly what happened. Mustafa kept diving deeper into this world. He started connecting with online hacker communities. They had websites, forums, and chat rooms where hackers from all over the world would gather to discuss everything related to hacking. They'd share their experiences, help each other out, and even discuss their goals. Some hacked for fun, while others hacked for profit. Some of them hacked for money, while others hacked for human rights or causes they believe are just, like freedom. Mustafa dove deep into these hacker communities, and the years passed until he turned 13. By then, his skills had reached a whole new level. He had learned so much, and executed dozens, maybe even hundreds of hacks. This is when he joined Anonymous. I'm sure many of you have heard that name before since they're always in the news. The name Anonymous translates to the unknown, and they're a group of hackers scattered across the globe. But they're not really a team in the traditional sense. They're more of a movement or a global coalition, because they don't have a central leader or headquarters. Any hacker from anywhere in the world can join them, as long as their goals align with Anonymous's ideals. Anonymous's mission is to defend freedom and fight for justice, so most of their targets tend to be governments or powerful corporations linked to governments. But here's the question. How do they work together when they're all over the world and don't have a central leadership? The answer is simple. The idea itself is the leader. For example, if a government, organization, or company does something against freedom or human rights, some hackers who consider themselves part of Anonymous might launch an attack. Other hackers around the world who also identify with Anonymous will see the attack and decide for themselves if the target deserves it. If they agree, they'll join in and help their fellow hackers. The more hackers around the world agree on a cause or target, the more attacks that target will face from different places. So in short, the idea is what leads Anonymous, not a central figure. Mustafa started working under the Anonymous banner when he was just 13 or 14 years old. One of the major attacks he was part of was the 2010 attack on MasterCard and Visa. Now we all know MasterCard and Visa, the big credit card companies. The reason Anonymous hackers attacked them in 2010 was that they blocked donations to WikiLeaks through their services. For those who don't know, WikiLeaks is an organization that leaks classified government documents. They've been targeted by many governments around the world, especially the U.S., because a lot of the documents WikiLeaks has leaked involve the U.S. government, exposing many of their dirty secrets. Naturally, the U.S. government sees WikiLeaks as its enemy, and the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, is one of the most wanted people by the U.S. government. Right now, he's imprisoned in the U.K., and the U.S. is still pushing for his extradition. American companies like MasterCard and Visa wouldn't allow donations to reach WikiLeaks through their services. WikiLeaks depends heavily on these donations, so Anonymous, being freedom fighters and anti-government, launched a retaliatory attack on MasterCard and Visa in 2010 to support WikiLeaks. Mustafa was one of the hackers who took part in that attack, which took down MasterCard and Visa's websites, causing them massive losses and major problems. While working under Anonymous, Mustafa met other hackers and started building friendships. Keep in mind, most of these hackers were young, some of them even teenagers like Mustafa. So even though they believed in freedom and fighting for justice, they also had a playful side. They would use their hacking skills just for fun, not always for noble causes. Mustafa knew that hacking for fun wasn't really something Anonymous stood for, so that's when he and 5 other hackers he met decided to form their own group called LulzSec. LulzSec was a real team with founders and members, unlike Anonymous, where anyone could claim to be part of it. LulzSec was exclusive, made up of just 6 members, including Mustafa and his friends. This team would go on to become one of the most notorious hacker groups in 2011, when Mustafa was only 16. The group's slogan was literally, laughing at your security, meaning their main goal was to hack just for laughs and giggles. LulzSec would pull pranks, like redirecting random people's phone calls to the FBI. Imagine trying to call a store, but suddenly you find yourself talking to someone at the FBI. Another thing they did was hack big news websites and post weird fake stories. One time, they published an article saying that rappers Tupac and Biggie, who were enemies and died in the 90s, were actually still alive and living together in New Zealand. One time, they hacked the website of Fox, the major media network, and managed to get into the database of the X Factor, a popular singing competition on Fox. They leaked the data of over 73,000 people who had applied to be on the show. A lot of these hacks had no real purpose, other than just messing around and having fun, but sometimes, they did have a target in mind. One of their biggest targets was Sony, and the reason they attacked them was that in 2010, Sony filed a lawsuit against a hacker named George Hotz. George managed to hack the PlayStation 3 and shared the method online, so anyone could hack their PlayStation 3 and download pirated games. Because of this lawsuit, many hackers saw Sony as a legitimate target and launched countless attacks against them. Mustafa and his group, LulzSec, alone hacked Sony 7 times. They hacked multiple Sony websites and services and leaked the data of over 1 million users, dealing a massive blow to the company. The Sony hack gave LulzSec a lot of fame. News outlets were writing about them, and they became huge on social media. Mustafa said that, at some point, they became more of a publicity team than just hackers. Other hackers would find security holes and give them to LulzSec, asking them to publish it under their name because LulzSec had a massive audience and reputation. Even though LulzSec was originally formed just for fun, their newfound fame brought them new challenges. These challenges would put them in direct conflict with the U.S. government and its security agencies, especially the FBI and CIA. One day, a cybersecurity company called HB Gary made a huge mistake. The FBI had contracted HB Gary to provide cybersecurity services, and the company's CEO, Aaron Barr, was overconfident. He went to a tech conference and claimed that he and his company were going to expose the identities of hackers working with Anonymous and LulzSec and turn them over to the FBI. This would turn out to be the biggest mistake of his life. The worst thing you can do is challenge young hackers with the brains and skills to take on the world's toughest security systems. By making that statement, Aaron Barr made himself and his company a prime target for LulzSec. Mustafa and his team immediately launched an attack on HB Gary in response to the CEO's claims. Despite being a cybersecurity company, HB Gary had huge security holes. The biggest vulnerability was Aaron Barr himself. Mustafa and his crew managed to hack into some of Aaron Barr's accounts on different sites and discovered that he used the same password for all his accounts: his social media, PayPal, company accounts, and personal accounts. This is one of the worst mistakes anyone can make in the digital world, especially if you're the CEO of a cybersecurity company. Once they cracked his password, they had access to his entire digital life: his emails, social media accounts, business accounts, everything. They even got into his Apple account and remotely wiped all the data from his iPad. But most importantly, they gained access to his company account at HB Gary. They broke into his work email and leaked over 70,000 confidential company emails. The hack was a massive scandal. How could a cybersecurity company be breached by a group of hackers, and how could the CEO's personal accounts be so poorly protected? On top of that, the leaked emails exposed shady practices the company used to collect data and track hackers. After this humiliation, Aaron Barr was forced to resign from his position and quit working for the company. He even had to move his family to a new home because their address was leaked, and they started receiving threatening messages. After their huge success in hacking HB Gary, LulzSec became an even bigger target for law enforcement. At that time, in 2011, the U.S. government, led by Obama, declared war on what they called cybercriminals. Mustafa and his friends in LulzSec were young and rebellious, so instead of calming down, they ramped up their attacks. One of the organizations they targeted was called InfraGard, a cybersecurity organization that worked closely with the U.S. government and the FBI. LulzSec hacked InfraGard's website, defaced its homepage with messages and a YouTube video, and compromised their database. They managed to get information on more than 180 people working for the organization, and gained access to their accounts. They leaked emails and a lot of data about the people after hacking that organization. After the InfraGard breach, Mustafa and LulzSec launched one of their most infamous attacks, an assault on the CIA's official website. On June 16, 2011, LulzSec posted a tweet on their Twitter account, which had over 300,000 followers at the time. The tweet said, "Tango down," meaning the enemy is down, and included the official CIA website URL, cia.gov, with the phrase "for the lulz" at the end, which was their usual motto, indicating they hacked just for fun. And indeed, the CIA's official website was hacked and taken down for a while. Although the hack didn't compromise any sensitive data, it was still an embarrassment for the CIA, supposedly the most powerful intelligence agency in the world, to have their website breached by a group of hackers. Unfortunately, shortly after that, Mustafa's adventures with LulzSec were coming to an end. The members of LulzSec were eventually arrested, despite being very careful not to leave any evidence or clues that could lead to their real identities or locations. In fact, even among themselves, they didn't know each other's real names, faces, or whereabouts. They only used aliases to keep their identities hidden. So how did law enforcement manage to catch them? The shocking discovery that Mustafa would later learn was that one of their own, one of the founding members of LulzSec, had turned into an FBI informant. This member, who went by the alias Sabu, was actually the oldest in the group at the time, 28 years old. His real name was Hector Monsegur, and he was the only American member of LulzSec living in New York City. Hector grew up in a poor family and had a tough life, especially since he was raised without a mother. His grandmother took care of him, and his father was barely in his life, barely providing the basic necessities. That's how Hector got into hacking. At first, it was purely for financial gain. He wanted to improve his life and his family's situation by making money. He used to hack into bank accounts and credit cards and all that stuff. But later, as he got deeper into the world of hacking, it became a passion for him, and he decided to use his skills for better causes. He started working under the banner of Anonymous, participating in their campaigns. Through that, he got to know some hackers who were also involved with Anonymous, including Mustafa, Hector, Mustafa, and 4 other hackers, founded LulzSec, and they continued to work together, carrying out the hacks we've talked about. Everything was going smoothly until they hacked InfraGard, the organization directly collaborating with the FBI. After the InfraGard breach, the FBI launched an investigation, and somehow, through undisclosed methods, managed to uncover Hector's identity. They raided his apartment and arrested him. During the interrogation, they gave him 2 choices: either face trial, which would likely result in a long prison sentence, or cooperate with them and help reveal the identities of the other members of his team. Plus, Hector would have to continue cooperating with them for years to come. Hector found himself stuck between 2 impossible choices. He wasn't just responsible for himself, he was also responsible for his family. His grandmother, who had raised him, passed away in 2010, and after that, he had to take on the role of head of the household. He was looking after 2 young girls, his brother's daughters. It's unclear why Hector was raising his brother's daughters. Maybe his brother had passed away, had issues, or abandoned them. But the point is that Hector was their primary caretaker. Prison was not an option for him, and the FBI knew this. They even threatened him, saying they would contact social services and have the girls taken away from the home. Faced with this impossible situation, Hector chose to prioritize his and his family's well-being, deciding to cooperate with the FBI and betray his friends. His job was to continue acting normally with LulzSec, so no one would suspect anything was wrong. But from that point on, all the conversations and communications happening between LulzSec members and their chat rooms were being recorded. The FBI even installed monitoring software on Hector's laptop, capturing all the group's conversations. The surveillance and spying lasted for about 2 months. In fact, the attack on the CIA's website that LulzSec carried out happened while they were under FBI surveillance, meaning the FBI knew about the operation in advance. They instructed Hector to go along with it and participate as usual, acting like nothing had changed. After that, somehow the FBI managed to uncover the identities of all the members of LulzSec, including Mustafa, except for one member, whose identity remains unknown to this day. In interviews, Hector clarified that his role was only to record the conversations between the group members. He said he didn't directly help reveal their identities because he didn't actually know their real names or identities himself, and they didn't know each other's identities either. To this day, we still don't know how they uncovered everyone else. Exactly how the FBI uncovered their identities is still unclear, but Hector's cooperation certainly played a major role. Mustafa explained that even though Hector may not have directly revealed their identities, the conversations they had were long, lasting hours. No matter how hard they tried to hide their identities and personal information, when they talked to each other, it felt like they were talking to family members. It's possible that small pieces of information slipped out unintentionally during these chats, and the FBI might have used those bits of information, pieced them together, and managed to figure out their identities. So, what Mustafa is saying is that even though Hector didn't personally reveal their identities, what he did was still a betrayal, since they considered each other like family. In any case, after the FBI managed to uncover their identities, Mustafa was the first to be arrested. Even though he was living in London, there was direct communication between the FBI and the British authorities. The police went to Mustafa's house, knocked on the door, and had a search and arrest warrant. Mustafa's brother opened the door, while Mustafa was in his room on his laptop. Mustafa was so cautious that he never kept any incriminating evidence or dangerous materials on his laptop. He was always careful to cover his tracks. As soon as his brother opened the door for the police, Mustafa sensed something was wrong, so the first thing he did was shut down his laptop. Although there was nothing on the laptop that could incriminate him, it was better to be safe than sorry. The police then immediately entered the room, searched it thoroughly, seized all the electronic devices, and arrested Mustafa, taking him with them to the station. Of course, his parents were in shock, not understanding what was happening. They knew their son loved computers, games, and that sort of thing, but they never imagined he was a hacker, and wanted by the authorities. At the police station, the officers sat Mustafa down for interrogation, and right away Mustafa asked for a lawyer. The police had hoped that he would cooperate easily since he was only 16 years old, but Mustafa was smart and immediately requested legal representation. The officers were visibly annoyed by this from the start. The police handed Mustafa papers, listing 84 charges against him, making each hacking operation a separate charge, so the total added up to 84 counts. The lawyer appointed to Mustafa advised him not to answer any questions and to respond with no comment to every question, and that's exactly what happened. Every time they asked him something, Mustafa replied, "No comment." The police became extremely frustrated by this. They tried to persuade him, saying that if he talked and cooperated, he might receive a lighter sentence. At the same time, they threatened him, saying the authorities could extradite him to the U.S. and hand him over to the FBI, but Mustafa managed to stay calm and kept his composure. He knew he was a minor, and that they couldn't impose a heavy sentence on him. He was also aware that the idea of being extradited to the U.S. was impossible given his age. In the end, after 24 hours, Mustafa was released on bail, with the understanding that he would stand trial later. During that period, 3 of his LulzSec friends were also arrested, and with that, the group officially disbanded. 1 member had turned into an informant, 4 were arrested, and the 6th member remains unidentified to this day. The surprising part was that 3 of the LulzSec members, including Mustafa and 2 others, were all living in Britain. A complete coincidence, since, as mentioned before, they didn't know where each other was from. The first time Mustafa and his fellow members met in person was in court. That was the first time they saw each other's real faces, despite considering each other like family. Another surprising twist was that one of the group members had been pretending to be a 16-year-old girl, but when their real identity was revealed, it turned out he was a 26-year-old ex-soldier. His reasoning for this deception was that he wanted to protect his real identity further, by adding another layer of security, so he lied about everything. But even with all the lies, in the end, he was exposed and caught. In the final court verdict, all the LulzSec members were sentenced to 2 to 2.5 years in prison, except for Mustafa, who was the only minor in the group. Mustafa was sentenced to 2 years, but it was a suspended sentence. This means the sentence would only be enforced if he committed another crime in the future. Additionally, he was sentenced to 320 hours of community service, which meant working without pay for one of the community organizations. They made him work at a non-profit store selling clothes for the deaf and mute as part of his sentence. He was banned from using the internet for 2 years, completely prohibited from accessing the web. He wasn't allowed to use any device that could connect to the internet. However, the authorities couldn't fully enforce this rule. If he was at home and went online, how would they know? Another part of his sentence was that he had to notify the police if he bought any new laptops or computers, or if he sold or got rid of any old ones. He was also prohibited from using any form of encryption, and he wasn't allowed to delete his browsing history from his browser. He had to follow all these rules for 5 years. That period passed, and the years went by. All the restrictions ended, and Mustafa closed that chapter of his past. He left the world of hacking behind, and today he works in other tech fields, like blockchain. And that brings us to the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you can get alerts when I post new videos. Here are more great stories you can check out and enjoy. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.